Welcome all. We're just
rain a-coming. I can feel it in my bones. There's a hard rain a-coming. I can feel it in my bones. There's a hard rain a-coming. I can feel it in my bones, 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 in my bones. There's a strong wind a-coming. I can feel it in my bones. There's a strong wind coming. I can feel it in my bones. There's a strong wind coming. I can feel it in my bones, 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 in my bones. There's a big flood a-coming. I can feel it in my bones. There's a big flood coming. I can feel it in my bones. There's a big flood coming. I can feel it in my bones, 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 in my bones. But there's hope for better weather. I can feel it in my bones. There's hope for better weather. I can feel it in my bones. There's hope for better weather. I can feel it in my bones, 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 in my bones.
That sounds like a good time to start. And welcome all. Thanks for coming in early. Welcome to our Mothers Out Front Massachusetts Climate Action Call. My name is Diane Sokol. I'm a member of the Brookline chapter and the statewide campaign team. For those of you who are not familiar with the Mothers Out Front Climate Action Calls, in the next 45 minutes, you will learn about a specific climate issue, and we will take focused action together. Today, we will be learning about how our public libraries can be climate leaders and how we can help promote this strategy in our local libraries across Massachusetts. We will hear from a familiar friend of Mothers Out Front, as well as a guest speaker from CREW, a national organization working on strengthening climate resiliency through local community action. Oh, sorry. So this month, we are pleased to welcome our allies from CREW, which stands for Communities Responding to Extreme Weather. Local community connections for climate action is becoming increasingly important, so we look forward to hearing from CREW today. And since we have many new faces here today, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves in the chat. Share your name, where you're calling from, and which organization you're with today. So here's a quick preview of the agenda for today's climate action call. After a brief overview of today's focus, we'll head directly into the presentation of our background information on our topic today. And we're including a new sort of interactive sharing of ideas through the chat. We'll then explain our action for today and share our toolkit. We've set aside about 15 minutes of this call to take action together. We'll come back together for a few important announcements and next steps, and we will end this meeting promptly at 12:45. So we do hope you'll stay until the end. Before we get going, I'll quickly go over a few norms for this meeting. Please rename yourself in Zoom to include your name, your city or town, and if you like, an organization you're with. Be sure to mute yourself when we're together in the main room if you're not already muted. You can use the chat to share comments or questions during the call. Closed captioning is available. You should be able to access that tool at the bottom of the screen. And finally, we are recording this climate action call. If you do not want to be seen in the recording, please use your Zoom controls to turn off your video. So across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there are almost 375 different public library systems located in nearly every Massachusetts city and town. Many of our public libraries lead the way on climate action, including reducing emissions and waste by sharing books, tools, and resources, building climate literacy through educational programs, and strengthening community ties. During crises like extreme weather or power outages, our libraries often serve as resilience hubs, offering heat, cooling, electricity, internet, and a safe place to gather. Today, we will highlight the great work of our public libraries. We'll write to Congress to show our support for maintaining federal funding of libraries and connect with our local libraries in climate action and outreach. So before we get started, we're going to start with a question. What do you love about your library? Have you had an experience at your public library that was particularly meaningful or memorable? You can share your answers in the chat, and Deb will also put that question in the chat. So while you're doing that, I want to give a warm welcome back to Laura Davis, who will be our background presenter today. Laura first started her journey with Mothers Out Front as a member of the Concord chapter. Later on, Laura became a Mothers Out Front staff member and worked with the statewide campaign team to organize this very series of monthly climate action calls. After a move to central Massachusetts, Laura has recently started working at her local public library, the Petersham Memorial Library. At the Mothers Out Front statewide assembly in February, for those who were there, Laura shared a display of many climate action and education projects that she has organized at her library. And that's where we picked up the conversation again about libraries as climate leaders. On a personal note, I want to share that working together with Laura on these climate action calls, I became a more knowledgeable climate advocate and a smarter collaborator. Laura has been such a patient teacher and a wise guide through my own climate journey with Mothers Out Front. Thank you so much, Laura, and I will pass it on to you. Oh, Laura, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. Diane, thank you so much for that. That was very sweet. Since today's call is all about libraries, I'm going to start the way a good library visit should start, with a story. And I'm going to tell you my personal narrative about how I came into the climate movement. The story actually starts on a farm. I studied sustainable agriculture in college, and my third summer farming was in 2011. And that year, I was working at a farm up in Huntington, Vermont, which is a small rural community, sort of halfway between Montpelier and Burlington. And at this farm, we raised livestock. So we were doing cattle and sheep, pigs, chickens, turkeys. We also made a lot of hay. Now, at the end of August of 2011, Tropical Storm Irene hit the state of Vermont. And Irene sat over Vermont for about 12 hours and dumped buckets and buckets of rain over the state. The mountains in Vermont, those really steep slopes, acted like a funnel and channeled the water down into the river valleys, which is where a lot of homes and town centers are located. 7 people died in the state of Vermont, more elsewhere along the storm's path, and hundreds of houses and buildings were damaged and swept away by floodwaters. Roads and bridges were washed out. 13 towns were cut off from vehicle access. There were prolonged power outages in many parts of the state. Now, I was really lucky. The farm where I worked and lived was up on the side of a mountain, and we were away from the floodwaters. However, some of our fields were down on leased land in the town of Richmond, which was right next to the Winooski River. That's where we had been stockpiling most of the hay we made that summer for our cattle, wrapped in those big sheets of plastic, the big white marshmallows that you see sitting out in fields. And during the storm, we lost all of that hay. Most of it washed downstream. Anything that was left behind had been soaked in the flood waters, which were contaminated with heating oil and human sewage, and they were unusable. It was a huge loss. I mean, a huge loss for the farm financially, but it was also a huge blow to the team, because if you've never made hay, it is an extremely labor-intensive process. And so to see an entire summer's worth of labor washed away in one evening was really demoralizing. But even still, we were really lucky. Our losses weren't so bad. I remember this one farm that I used to drive by and admire all season. And It was this little vegetable farm that had crops in a field that was between the road and the river. And after Irene, I drove by it, and it wasn't just the crops that were gone, it was the topsoil. It looked like a dry riverbed. It was the kind of loss that you could never recover from as a farmer. And that experience has obviously stayed with me. So after the flood, I was amazed by how the communities in Vermont came together. It was really neighbors helping neighbors that made sure people had the things that they needed immediately after the storm, shelter, food, water, a sump pump. I spent one of my days off digging out a stranger's basement in Richmond, thanks to a mutual aid network that had been organized. This is not to minimize the role that FEMA played. Federal funding was really critical in the recovery, but the community response, especially in the immediate aftermath of the storm, was so critical. And it definitely shaped my understanding of what we need to build in our communities to be resilient to these kinds of events. Fast forward 7 years to 2018. I was a new mom. In October, my son was 5 months old. And I was sitting in my son's nursery one afternoon. I nursed him to sleep for his naps, and I often listened to the radio on my headphones. And that day, there was this 3-minute segment about climate change on the news. It was about the report from the UN that they released in 2018 that described what the world might look like if we reach 1.5 degrees of warming, which is a threshold that we actually reached last year. And something about that report flipped a switch in my brain. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I had lived through an extreme weather event. So this picture that the scientists painted with this report, it wasn't theoretical to me. I knew what that was going to look like, what more frequent and severe storms could do to communities, and the pain and suffering that was going to cause. And I remember so distinctly turning the radio off at the end of the segment and looking down at this new baby with horror, because I was so afraid for his future. And that moment transformed me. It lit me on fire. I was filled with this anxious energy for months afterwards, and it just needed to be channeled into something positive. And I was so grateful to find Mothers Out Front and find a community of people to work with. And it's been such a joy to be a part of this community. So fast forward a little further, I was part of the Concord chapter until I moved last summer, and we've worked with our library on and off for years, but last January, a little over a year ago, we decided to partner with the library more frequently to put together really small events. In the past, we had sort of done these big events. And so we started to collaborate with the librarians about how to do sort of a monthly sustainability story time. And take over some of their craft programs and kind of give it a little bit more sustainability focus. And we've covered a lot of topics in these programs. Public transportation, we had a visit with our electric school bus at the library. We worked on a renewable energy story time, bike safety. We had one on extreme weather and disaster preparedness during Climate Prep Week, which Rachel's going to talk about. And as a result, our chapter has built a really beautiful relationship with our library that I think we all really enjoy. We were even lucky enough to have one of our branch librarians join our leadership team. And through this experience, and also from talking to library directors, I have found that most libraries are constrained by their resources. Their staff already do a lot of things. And so our library certainly was very open to the idea of us coming in and partnering and bringing more programming about sustainability to the library, because it was already part of what they wanted to be doing. And obviously, it's been great for us. They're really great, bright, bite-sized events that we can pull together with a few volunteers and a little bit of planning. They've been a great way to meet new families in the community. And the man reading the story in the upper left picture is actually our state representative. So we've used this as a way to also connect with our local officials. We invited him to be a guest reader at our Earth Day story time last year. Now I could run a whole program on fabulous programs that you could do at your library. I do have some resources in our toolkit, which we'll be sharing later. And I know we have some library directors and some library workers signed up today. So I just want to put an offer out that if anybody does want to to meet one-on-one with me, I'd be very happy to make myself available for one-on-one meetings if you want to brainstorm ideas for your particular library. If you're a Mothers Out Front member that wants to approach your library, or if you are working at a library and would like to bring some of these programs in. So as Diane said, libraries are natural partners for addressing climate change. By their very function, they are allowing communities to reduce their consumption through borrowing. And so I really believe that they are our natural partners in this work. And so much so that when I moved to this new community, and there was an opening at my library, I thought this seems like the perfect place for me to be in my new community. And I've been really grateful to join the staff at my local library and learn about library work from the other side of the volunteer staff divide. And this week is actually National Library Week, which is perfectly timed for this program. It's a great time to celebrate all the ways that libraries are already making their communities more sustainable and how they connect people to each other and to resources that they need. This topic is also timely because libraries are really embracing sustainability in a big way. In 2022, the American Library Association adopted sustainability as a core value. And this is the cover of this month's edition of the American Libraries magazine. And so I just want to move on. I know we're running a little bit behind time, so I want to move on and introduce Crew and Rachel. Libraries are really seeing themselves as climate resilience hubs. It's one of the things that they talked about in that American Libraries magazine. So our special guest today is going to be able to tell us a little bit more about how libraries are becoming these resilience hubs. Rachel Boyce is the Climate Justice and Resilience Manager at Better Future Project, and she has many duties, but one of them is that she coordinates the Climate Resilience Hubs program and has worked directly with community institutions all around the country, including libraries. And they're educating their residents about extreme weather preparedness, about the local impacts of climate change, the threats that they may see in their communities. So I'm going to turn it over to Rachel now to tell us more about climate resilience hubs and how libraries in particular are preparing their communities for more frequent and severe storms.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for sharing your narrative. It's always a really hard thing to do, I think, and a vulnerable place to be to share your narrative. So thank you for sharing that with us today. And thank you for having me join your monthly call. Laura already introduced me, but I just want to take, Rachel Boyce, Climate Justice and Resilience Manager for the Better Future Project, and work on our Crew program, Communities Responding to Extreme Weather. Next slide, please. So I just want to take a quick moment to orient Crew within the Better Future Project programs, because there's a good chance that some of you or all of you know the Better Future Project or know one of our other programs. Holistically, the core focus of our work at the Better Future Project is building short and long-term resilience in an increasingly changing climate. And we think about resilience in two ways. Oftentimes, resilience is a buzzword that's thrown out a lot, but I really want to break it down to there's two different types of resilience: climate resilience and social resilience. Climate resilience often focuses on disaster response, but it is also the anticipation of a shifting environment. Examples of this are rain gardens, shifting physical infrastructure away from coastlines, and planting trees. These are actions we can take during times of relative stability to ensure that our lived environment and therefore ourselves are able to adapt to a changing climate. Social resilience focuses on the enhancement and adaptation of the social fabric. These are our social networks, our cultural centers, mutual aid networks, social services, etc. And actually, if you want to go back to the previous slide. Yeah, thanks. We approach climate and social resilience in different ways across Better Future Project's 3 programs. First and foremost is strength-based and community-formed resources. This is how our communities adapt and evolve to our changing environment while paying particular attention to the disproportionate impacts marginalized communities face. This is a community-by-community process that assesses strengths to amplify and challenges to address. After assessing community resources, we focus on education. Beyond its current assets, what additional resources does a community need to build resilience? So Crew works across these 2 areas and overlaps with Better Future Project's grassroots advocacy and organizing arm, 350 Mass, which is possibly what everyone here is familiar with, on community engagement and education. And last but not least is our grassroots advocacy for community-informed policies, because it's communities that know best what we need in order to build resilience. Amongst our numerous legislative priorities and what I do in addition to my work with CREW is I'm a co-lead on the Make Polluters Pay campaign. That's a climate change superfund bill that funds climate-related damages and prepares Massachusetts communities and infrastructure for future extreme weather events. Community-informed policies are where 350 Mass overlaps with our Make Polluters Pay campaign. So as you see, there are many different ways to go about building social and climate resilience, and we do some of them through Better Future Project. Next slide, please. So let's dive specifically into CREW. CREW started as a resilience hub network. Resilience hubs are a model for community-based resources grounded in local leadership. Thinking back to Laura's powerful narrative that she shared with us at the beginning of this call, when climate emergencies strike, the first responders are often your communities. They're the ones that are there before the emergency, they're the ones that are there during the emergency, and they're the ones that are there during recovery. Yes, we rely on or have relied on federal funding, which is going to be significantly reduced, but it is our communities that sustain us through climate emergencies. These hubs around the country are libraries, houses of worship, community centers, and other trusted community spaces that respond to the everyday needs, periodic disruptions, and subsequent recovery of communities. Another large part of our programming is Climate Preparedness Week. I'll dive deeper into both the Hub Network and Climate Preparedness Week in the upcoming slides. Here's like the lay of CREW's work. We do not have time to delve into the regional planning projects we collaborate on, but I wanted to quickly mention that due to our community-centric focus, we've increasingly been sought out to support regional planning in the Northeast. And so that has drawn a lot of our attention in the last couple of years. This has not deterred from our work on resilience hubs, but has definitely recalibrated our approach to building community resilience and has just allowed us to work more deeply, more intentionally in the communities that are immediately surrounding us. Next slide, please. Thanks. So resilience hubs, more broadly, operate in 3 different modes: everyday engagement, disruption, and recovery. Hubs operate as everyday engagement centers about 99% of the time. And one of the great reasons why libraries are our ideal hub, so we have 162 hubs across the country, most of them are libraries, is because libraries are already providing resources and education. They're already gathering places. They are already a core part of most communities. Hubs spend less than 1% of the time operating to serve disruption and recovery. During these periods, hubs can be central gathering areas during emergencies, distribute resources, be an operating post of municipal emergency management officials, and provide a central organizing space for volunteer networks and recovery organizations. Again, additional reasons why libraries are strong models for resilience hubs, because libraries are already doing all of this work. They're collecting the stories, they're acting as a gathering place, they're bringing the communities together in times of healing, but also in times of strength to build up resilience before the next disaster strikes. The libraries around the country, again, already trust the spaces where community members look to for guidance and connection. Next slide, please. So this is our network. We currently have 162 hubs nationwide, and the majority are concentrated in the Northeast. And this has already been spoken to earlier in the presentation by both Diane and Laura. One of the greatest challenges of the hub network is CREW. We do not offer direct financial support for the hub leaders. So each of our hub leaders, most of them librarians, are already doing this resilience organizing on top of their full-time jobs. And if they're working in a region of the country where resilience is not built into the municipal vocabulary, they're carrying that torch of resilience for their communities. So this means that across these 162 hubs, programming and interface with their communities and the broader network will vary from location to location. Next slide, please. But we do ask that at minimum, each one of these hubs is able to operate on this lower end of the spectrum of a resilience hub, of being an engagement center. As I've already said, most of our hubs are libraries, and since libraries are often used as cooling and heating centers, many of them are actually also able to serve as this the relief station, sort of like the middle of the spectrum of being a resilience hub, since they're already operated as cooling centers, heating centers, somewhere where you can go to plug in your phone or use the computer if the internet has gone down, somewhere for you to seek shelter temporarily during the day. Next slide, please. So out of the crew events, Climate Prep Week, Climate Preparedness Week is the most widely advertised and attended both within our Resilience Hub network and amongst our climate justice partners nationwide. Someone does not need to be a crew resilience hub in order to participate. It is always the final 7 days of September, which is also National Preparedness Month. While crew works year-round to prepare communities for extreme weather, this week is a focused week of programming to raise awareness of the connection between climate change, extreme weather, and varying levels of community impact. It's a great vehicle to engage with communities on all things related to climate change and a great opportunity to connect local programming with a national movement around climate resilience. Each year, we choose a different theme and ask partners nationwide to host events alongside our crew national events. So here are the themes and a few central events from the past 3 years, but you can see the full programs on our Climate Prep Week website, which I've linked in the action guide. It's under the resources listed under crew communities responding to extreme weather. I especially want to highlight the Sustainable Living Library program led by Alyssa Valenti-Kroski in 2022, and the Depaving and Other Nature-Based Solutions workshop conducted by various community partners in 2024. Both of these events highlighted awesome opportunities for community members of all ages to participate in. I've dropped those links. I'm going to drop these in the chat real quickly. But again, they're also linked in the action toolkit under the resources section. Next slide, please. So how can you get involved? If your library is not already a library, ask them if they're interested in joining. I'm happy to jump on a call with any representative of a library to talk through like what does it mean to be a part of the crew network. It costs nothing to join, and again, as I'd already said, we do not offer financial assistance for libraries to join, but they get access to a network of experts. We host a speaker and workshop series. We provide educational resources through our shared drive, and we support hub programming during Climate Prep Week. If they're not interested in becoming a hub, encourage them to participate in Climate Prep Week. If staff capacity is an issue, offer to lead or co-lead climate programming. This could be something from the Sustainable Living Library programs, that the program that I already shared in the chat and is available through the toolkit, or could be leading a story hour. And lastly, pass a municipal resolution in your town or city declaring the final week of September Climate Prep Week. Some of our most successful hubs across the country are in areas where resilience is a core feature of municipal planning across many sectors. One organization or community member or library is not able to carry the torch of resilience. It truly does take a village. So it's passing a municipal resolution pushes your city and town in the direction of embracing resilience as one of their core principles. And I also put a copy of the draft, so it's a Climate Prep Week resolution template in the resources guide as well, but I will also drop it in the chat. And next slide, there's questions.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And if anybody has questions, feel free to add them to the chat as we continue. I want to get us to our action really quickly. But first, I want to give us a little bit of context. We're going to zoom out a little bit. So you have probably heard that the Trump administration has taken aim at our public libraries. And on March 14th, he signed an executive order essentially dismantling the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which is the IMLS. The IMLS is a very small federal agency with around 70 employees, and they award grant funding to both museums and to libraries. And this is the dystopian post that Trump officials posted on IMLS's Instagram after they furloughed all of their employees. $6.7 million to enhance equitable library programs, $1.5 million for social justice programming. This is their justification for dismantling the only federal agency that supports our public libraries. I find this particularly chilling because it's a warning that even if IMLS survives somehow, which seems unlikely, they will not be funding programming that I want to see. They will not be funding equitable access to information, social justice programming, climate change. Like these are not things that the Trump administration supports, and they're going to be very selective about what kinds of institutions and what kinds of projects get funded if they continue to fund public libraries at all. Let's talk for a moment about the local impacts. Massachusetts receives $3.6 million from IMLS, which is actually quite small in the grand scheme of things, but it's really important for our libraries. This is money that is received by a state agency called the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. They set policy and administer a wide array of important statewide programs and services. And they also provide some of this money as grants, small grants to individual libraries. So some of the things that our federal money has been funding are statewide library ebook and audiobook programs. So if you're a Libby user, this is one of the things that is at risk. The Comcat statewide interlibrary loan system is another. Online research databases, which are used primarily by schools. And perhaps most worrying for those of us who think about climate change, programs for disaster preparedness for libraries is funded by federal dollars. Training and resources for librarians to do risk assessments and mitigation planning in order to minimize the impacts of a disaster. The Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners has already announced funding cuts based on the anticipated loss of these federal funds. They want to minimize the risk of incurring expenses that IMLS is never going to reimburse. And those cuts include small grants to 18 libraries, lots of training opportunities, programs at prison libraries. These are really important programs that they didn't want to cut and we don't want to see cut. So you can imagine, I'm giving you this context in part because we're going to move on to our action. And I think it's really important to understand the broad scheme thing here, but beyond climate. These institutions are under threat. Funding is being cut. Statewide services that libraries rely on are in jeopardy. And you can add to that the rise of book bans, the fact that 400 volumes were purged from the U.S. Naval Academy Library in recent weeks. Libraries are one of our greatest allies in the fight against climate change, and we should be showing up for them in a big way because, the only way that we are going to make progress in the context of these headwinds is to band together and build stronger communities. So moving on to our action here. We've prepared an action toolkit for you to follow today, and it's a little dense. I really had trouble trimming things because I love libraries so much. Before I share the link with you, I'm just going to quickly run over what our actions are. The first one is very quick. We're going to act in solidarity with the American Library Association by sending emails to our elected officials in Congress, asking them to protect federal funding for libraries, the IMLS. This should be very straightforward. They've got a great form here. You fill out the form. It will look up your elected official for you. Just note that the email opt-in box is preset to yes. So if you are trying to limit the amount of email you receive, just adjust that field. The next action can really be as in-depth as you want it to be. While we're on the call today, I want to encourage everybody to pull up your library's website. See what events are coming up. Do they have a newsletter you can sign up for? Do they have a social media account that you can follow? Can you like one of their posts? Is there a library app you've been meaning to download? Can you join your friends association? You take an action right now, even if it's a small one, to support your library. If you're not particularly tech savvy, I do recommend going into your library and asking them about downloading apps if you're interested in that. And I want everybody here to make a plan to visit your library. This is National Library Week. It's a great time to go into your library. And I don't think that I quite understood this until I started working at a library. Our visits really matter. they are the thing that help make the case for the continued existence of your public library. Every time you walk into the library, your visit is recorded and it helps justify your library's existence. So plan to use it more regularly. Plan to work from there sometimes. Meet up with friends there. Use that resource, you know, to its fullest. So the next time you're in your library, I encourage you to walk around with some fresh eyes. Notice some things that you might not have seen before. There may be new parts of the collection. They may have added items to a library of things. So really think about what you want to do at your library next time. And if you want to put your commitment into the chat, that you're going to go to your library at a particular time and do a particular thing, that makes it a little bit more concrete. Make sure it gets in your calendar too. And finally, I want to encourage everybody to reach out to their library directors. I've prepared a template, but I really encourage you to personalize it. You'll see that I have lots of prompts in the template encouraging you to do so. Now, when I started planning this call, I had an email template that had a lot more asking them to do things. But given the events of recent weeks, this is a moment for us to be offering support, to be offering appreciations, and giving them stories about why the library matters to us. So the next time they have to justify their existence to their board or town meeting voters or a grant making institution, they have stories from us to tell them to tell other people why their library matters, especially when it comes to the programming that they're doing around sustainability and climate work, because that work may be under threat under this new administration. So with that, I'm going to have Deb put the link into the chat. And if you have questions, please feel free to put those into the chat as well, and I will answer them. Also, feel free to share other thoughts and discoveries in the chat. Maybe you can add something that your library is already doing around climate change that you think other libraries should do. And then we're going to be quiet for just a few more minutes, and then we'll call everybody back to close us out in 3 or 4 minutes.
I hope you had success starting these actions. Sorry, we ran a little bit late, but you'll be able to finish up these actions later. These climate action calls really make me hopeful what we can do together, what we can do with our allies and with our local community resources. I hope that we will make progress here with the libraries. So next slide. Later today or tomorrow, you will receive a follow-up email. It will have links to a recording of this call, links to the slides, and the toolkit we shared today. So we encourage you to forward that email to your network within your local community and also with friends and neighbors across the Commonwealth. Share with them what you learned today about your libraries. Mothers Out Front hosts a welcome call the second Friday of every month at noontime. That's coming up this Friday. If you have asked yourself, what more could I be doing to stop climate change? Then this is a great call for you to join. We'll identify different things you can do to help the movement using your personal talents, skills, and experiences. So Deb will put that link into the chat to sign up for that. We also have a climate action call coming every month. Our next climate action call will be Tuesday, May 6th at noon. Add this date into your calendar and look for an email or a link in Switch the Source to RSVP. You won't want to miss that. So Deb's putting that date in the calendar. And finally, I'm going to pass it over to Laura for a little plug here.
I'm going to plug a delightful and extremely unique program that's being co-hosted by a number of libraries, not mine, but I think it's so fabulous I had to share it. One of the genres that a local librarian introduced me to is romance. It's become a great escapist genre when I need to get away from my climate anxiety. So this is a mishmash of romance novels and climate action. And if you've worked with me before, you'll know that I often talk about how do we reach beyond the choir, reach people who are not already engaged in the climate movement. And I can't think of a more out of the box way to get people to talk about climate change than to put it in a romance novel. So Deb's going to put a link to that in the chat. It's being hosted by the Ashland Public Library. And you can sign up on Zoom for that.
That sounds like a fun event. Thanks, Laura. And thanks again to our guest speakers, and many thanks to all of you for joining together in action today in your own communities. let's strengthen and amplify our message by spreading this action through our networks across the Commonwealth and help all of Massachusetts local libraries. And we look forward to seeing you again next month.
And
Thank
as
you.
you guys head out today, feel free to drop book recommendations in the chat. Thank you all so much. And thanks, Diane, for being a great MC. Thank you, Rachel, for your time. And thanks, Christine and Deb, for being our support staff.
Thank you.
And we'll also take some of these ideas from the chat and put them in a document to share when you get that email.